Welcome to Teter's Home Cooking again. Today we are going to be making coconut cream pie. I was not very good at making pies when I first got married, but because my mother and my mother-in-law were pie bakers, I decided I needed to take up the art of making pies. My mother made pies down at Mabel's restaurant here in Macon many years ago, and so she was famous for her chocolate pies. And my mother-in-law was famous for me for her peach pies. And I guess I have sort of got a reputation for making coconut cream pies, because when we go to our senior meetings at church, they always want me to bring coconut cream pie. So that is my specialty, and so that's what we're going to be making today. I'm using the recipe that my mother-in-law gave me, and so I will be using 1 1/3 cups of flour, a half a teaspoon of salt, a half a cup of shortening, and ice water. And so I've got my flour and my salt already in the bowl, and I always put a little water in my cup before I get my shortening in there, and then the shortening comes out a lot easier. And so I'm getting me a half a cup of shortening, and I take off a little bit, but I leave it heaped up a little bit because I like my crust pretty short so that it's nice and flaky. And so I'm taking it out of the cup here, and it comes out a little easier if you put just that little dab of water in there. Clean off my fingers and get that down into the bowl. And then I use a pastry thingy, whatever that's called, a pastry hook, and make my flour until it comes into like a sort of a cornmeal texture. And so we'll fluff it up here a little bit, get it off of my fingers. But my husband's mother made wonderful pie crust, and so when one day she gave me her recipes, and so like I said, I add just a little bit of extra shortening, maybe an extra tablespoon or so when I'm making just a single crust, because I like them nice and flaky. And then the other secret to good pie crust is using ice water, and so I always fix me a thing of ice water, because you want your shortening not to melt, because if it gets all warm, then it's not near as flaky. And so you use ice water, and that will make your pie crust stand up a little firmer, and it will keep those pieces of shortening from melting, because you don't want them to melt until you get it into the oven. Okay, now you take 3 or 4 tablespoons of ice water, and you sprinkle that over your flour mixture, and then you mix that up. And you don't want to mix your pie dough very much, just till it starts coming together in a ball, because you want it to keep that coldness that this ice water gives it. Because I think that's the secret of having a good flaky crust. Okay, it's just about there. And you can just put it in the refrigerator and let it set. I think that will keep the coldness and make it flakier too. But since we are wanting to get this in the oven pretty quick, we won't put this in the refrigerator and get it extra cold. But you can wrap it up in saran wrap and stick it in there for about 30 minutes, and then you'll be ready to roll it out. But we're going to do it right now. So then you take a little of your flour, and you can wrap this in saran wrap, or put saran wrap on your counter, a little bit of water, and then put another piece of saran wrap on top. and then you won't have your mess directly onto your counter. But it doesn't take much to clean up a mess. I'm sort of used to it. So just work it a little bit, and then you take your rolling pin. And this rolling pin was a gift from my mother. When I first got married, she had saved her S&H green stamps, and so this was one of my little shower gifts that she gave me. And this is the only rolling pin I've ever used. And you don't want to dip it down in water because it's got ball bearings in it, and it would rust and not be very good. So there, I rolled it out, and then I always just sort of set my plate on the top of it to see if it's large enough, and it is. And then some people wrap it around their rolling pin, but I just set my dish right in front and then lift up my dough and work it right across onto my pie plate. And then you just pat it down into your bowl, or to your pie plate, not bowl. Work it down so that it lays flat against there. And then I just crimp the edges up, because I like a good amount of crust. Some people don't like the crust. I think the crust is the best part. And so I always crimp it up a little bit like that around the edges. And then I'll take my knife and I'll trim it off. Oops. Lay those little pieces aside. I'll show you what I do with that here pretty soon. And then I'll try to make my pie crust look a little nicer here on the edges. And so we'll go around the whole thing, putting a little ripple, or you can take a fork and press it down, whichever way you like to make it look a little better around the edges. Okay, we're just about there. There we go. And then you'll take your fork and you'll want to prick the bottom. So put a few marks in the bottom, and then that's your pie crust ready to go in the oven. Now on a cream pie, you always bake your pie crust first. So we're going to go stick this in my oven at 375. And we're going to set the timer for about, we'll go 15 minutes and we'll check it here. And then this, a lot of times when I'm making apple pie or any kind of a fruit pie, I just make the pie crust like in my ball, and then I'll take the pie crust and I'll make it out into just little pie crusts like this, and then I'll sprinkle sugar over it. And so then you have your individual pie crust, put your fruit over it and your ice cream, and then you just have individual pies, and so you'll have fresh pie every day, or every day as long as it lasts anyway. So I'll bake that later. Okay, now I'm going to clean up this mess, and then we'll start on the filling. Okay, now we're ready to make the filling for our coconut cream pie. I use a cup of sugar, 1/4 of a cup of cornstarch, a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, a tablespoon of butter, 3 cups of milk, and 4 eggs, and you'll separate them because you'll want your whites for the meringue and the yolks then for your filling. And so I've already done that part. So I'm going to beat up my yolks a little bit, and then I'm going to stir my sugar and my cornstarch together. You want them mixed together well before you put any liquid into that, because then it won't be lumpy if you get it mixed well. So you want to do that. And then what I do is I pour about a cup of my milk. This is 3 cups of milk, and I pour about a cup of my milk, more or less, into my eggs. And then I put the rest of it in my pan. And we'll turn that on medium heat. You don't want it too high. And then you'll take your butter and stick it in your milk. And then you'll take a teaspoon of your vanilla, and I always put it right in my milk. Then, after I've stirred my sugar and my cornstarch together, then I add my milk and my eggs to the cornstarch and the sugar. And you might ask why. Well, that's the way my mommy did it. And so then that makes sort of a pudding type. And then when your milk gets warm, and then you can put this in your milk, and it doesn't take quite so long to cook, and then it doesn't come near as scorching and as it would if you just heated it all up at one time. I think is the reason that she did it that way. But you'll want to remember, don't cook your pudding on high. You'll need to do it on just a medium heat. So I'm going to turn that down just a little bit because it will scorch if you don't keep stirring it constantly. And you want a nice smooth pudding. And so you cook it on more of a medium heat than a high heat. And then you mix this up real well, get all the little bitty lumps mixed together here so that you'll have a nice smooth pudding. And then we'll dump this into the warming milk over there in just a few minutes here. I've got a few more. I didn't quite get my cornstarch mixed up as well as what I should have. So I've got a few little lumps here, but they'll cook out. But I always like to get as many out as I can. So it's just about ready to go over here to my stove. And you can make chocolate pie with this same recipe. Just add 3 tablespoons of cocoa in with your sugar and your cornstarch, and then you'll have chocolate pie. With my chocolate pie, I put vanilla and a half a teaspoon of almond. A friend of mine, well, in fact, it's my pastor, likes chocolate pie. And he told me that was his mama's secret, was to put the almond in. So I've started putting the almond into my chocolate pie, and it's really, really good. And you could, if you wanted to get creative, you could put a layer of your coconut pudding and a layer of your chocolate pudding, and then you have a sort of an almond joy pie. So, just get creative in the kitchen. All right, we're going to pour this in over here. My butter and my vanilla is melting, and my butter is melting in my milk here. And like I said, it takes a little while for this to cook, but you don't want to cook it very high because it will scorch, and there's nothing worse than pie that tastes like burnt milk. So, and it can happen pretty quickly, so you do have to keep an eye on it and keep stirring it. Okay, we have been cooking this now for a few minutes, and I've got my temperature turned way down on very low, and it is thickening up here, you can see. And so I'm stirring it up from the bottom, and this is just about ready. I'm going to cook it just a few seconds longer, and then I'll add my coconut. Okay, now then, You say, how much coconut? I always just do a big handful. So this is probably a half a cup to 3/4 of a cup of coconut. I'm gonna stir that in. I'm gonna take it off the heat because I think this is ready. So I'm gonna stir that coconut all in there. Ooh, this is looking good, if I do say so myself. Okay, now I'm going to put the lid on this. I took it off the heat, and then I will do my meringue. So that's step number 3 is the meringue. So we'll get ready to do that. This is my 4 egg whites that I used from my 4 egg yolks that I used in my pudding. So that's, you used your whites for your meringue. And this has been at room temperature. And so they always say that it works there, your egg whites fluff up better at room temperature. So I'm going to put in a 1/4 of a teaspoon of cream of tartar. You start your eggs yolks going a little bit, get them a little frothy. And then I will add the cream of tartar. And then I do 2 tablespoons of sugar per egg white. So I've got 4 egg whites, so I've got 8 tablespoons of sugar in my bowl, and I'll add it a little at a time as the egg whites begin to froth up here. And I'm going to turn my speed up. So there goes in one. We'll let that beat for quite a little while so they sort of dissolve. And then you just keep adding your sugar as your eggs beat, and you want them nice and glossy. You don't want to overbeat them because then they sort of look separated. But if you'll watch and they get glossy, then it's time then to stop. Okay, I'm going to add another big tablespoon of sugar. I'm going to turn it up a little more. And this is also how you make angel food cake, with your egg whites and your sugar and all that kind of stuff. My daughter's great at making angel food cakes, but this is meringue, and we'll then add coconut at the end, and then we'll bake it. So it's just sort of a process. Okay, I'm going to add some more sugar. This is how you make divinity, sort of, too, with egg whites. But I'm not a divinity maker. I have made a few angel food cakes, but I'm not the expert. My daughter is. But we'll see how this meringue turns out. I'm going to stop it and scrape the sides of the bowl. And see, it's getting there, but not quite. I've got a little more sugar to add. I'm going to check my pie crust. That's close. I'm going to scrape the sides down again, make sure all that sugar, oh, they're getting close. See those nice peaks? See? I think that'll do it. So now we got to wait for my pie crust to finish baking. So we've had it in about it's been about 25 minutes, I think. And so I'm going to check on it. But we want it nice and brown too. See, my little ones, they're about done. Now we're going to let that pie crust go just a couple more minutes. We're not going to rush it because we want it nice and crispy. All right, I think the pie crust is done. Yep, you can see the smoke coming out. I spilled some sugar at the bottom of my, there. See how pretty that is? There you go. I'm going to shut this up for a minute. We'll be using that again. before long. Okay, now you'll take your pie filling and we're going to stick that into our pie like that. Make it nice and full. There we go. And then we're going to take our, there it is, meringue. And we're going to put that right on top. I like get every bit. I'm one of these that cleans everything. Okay. And then there's my meringue. So now I'm going to put that right on top of your hot filling, and you want to seal it clear to the edges. And I always start on the outside and go all the way around. Sort of like that. Building it as you go. Turn it around so you can see. You can cover up and seal it down like that. One more time. As I said, I take these to our senior dinners when we have soup suppers or something like that, or Thanksgiving meals at church. And I used to only take one, but everybody was fighting over my coconut pie, so now I take two. And see, this makes a good portion of meringue. And they beat up really well today. Okay. Now, someone said if you do this, take a back of a spoon and get your little peaks in that, and then you take your coconut and you just sprinkle a little handful of coconut over the top of your meringue. And then that will brown and make it look really pretty. Okay, now I'm going to stick that back in the oven. See if my smoke comes out again where I spilt some sugar. Okay, I'm going to set my oven for about 15 minutes. Okay, we're ready to take this out. This has been baking about 15, well, no, what? I didn't reset that. About 10 minutes at 375. I believe is what that is. And there is your coconut pie. After step 1, making your crust. Step 2, make your filling. And step 3 is making your meringue. And you now have coconut cream pie. And it really is good. See you next time. Goodbye.